Hello, I'm Graham Dale. I imagine you'll be familiar with the aphorism that a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. Sadly, this is particularly true in Britain, where the EU rejoiners never accepted the democratic decision of the 2016 referendum, and ever since have mounted a relentless campaign of propaganda to brainwash the British people into believing that Brexit is a failure and the source of all their ills. I recall Nick Clegg writing to the effect that old codgers like me who'd voted leave would soon die off and be replaced with younger, more pliable minds to brainwash. They've accordingly pumped out false economic data by the truckload, unchallenged by the pro-rejoin media, which regurgitates ad nauseum that Brexit has been an economic disaster. These are barefaced lies. The OECD statistics show that the UK economy has grown by 12% since 2016, which is better than Japan, Germany, Italy, and France. And it's grown by 17.3% since leaving the EU in 2020. Better than France, Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands. The Rejoiners endlessly parrot a report by the US think tank, the National Bureau of Economic Research, that estimated that leaving the EU had reduced Britain's GDP by as much as 8% since 2016. Well, even to a non-economist like me, this sounds very unlikely. Simply because if we add to Britain's recorded growth of 12% since 2016, the 8% claimed lost growth posited by the NBER, this would mean that the UK economy had grown by 20% since 2016. This would compare with 11.4% for France, 9.5% for Italy, 5.3% for Germany, and make us the fastest growing economy in the G7, second only to the US. The rejoiners fail to appreciate this obvious and ineluctable conclusion and prefer instead to claim in isolation that the UK economy has taken an 8% hit because of Brexit. Their breathtaking mendacity knows no bounds. To them, it's expedient to lie and deceive the British people. Facts are ignored and falsehoods created. This shameful process has now become a serious threat to democracy in Britain. The rejoiner wolves in sheep's clothing are now in government and have a massive Commons majority, which they are using to take Britain back into the EU by lies, deception, and manipulation. The Labour Party manifesto in 2024 specifically ruled out returning to the single market, to the customs union, or in allowing freedom of movement, stating explicitly that the UK will remain outside the EU. However, what's happened since Labour came to power? In short, Starmer, he who campaigned vigorously for a second referendum to overturn the first, has embarked on the biggest political betrayal in the history of British politics. Never before, to my knowledge, have the British people been lied to on such a flagrant industrial scale. In his campaign of deceit, Starmer has so far extended the Brexit fisheries agreement by 12 years without any tangible benefit to the UK at an estimated cost of £9 billion in lost fish stocks. He's agreed a sanitary and phytosanitary deal that dynamically aligns UK food standards, food safety, animal health, and food marketing with the EU, complying with their rules to be enforced by their court with no UK input. He's made agreements on electricity supply, carbon trading, chemical regulations, and others, all of which will add huge cost to the British economy and industry. He's agreed to rejoin the Erasmus student exchange scheme, with an initial joining fee of almost £600 million for only 6 months. He's ditched our own superior and less costly worldwide Turing scheme. And now the EU want their students to be subsidised by the British taxpayer by insisting that EU students pay the same fees as domestic UK students, not as other overseas students. He's also recently introduced 76 new EU laws made since we left the EU, primarily in agriculture and food, to dynamically align with the single market rules. Starmer's also announced that he wants to include cars, robotics, life sciences, and climate technology in his ever-expanding single market reset. It's as plain as a pikestaff that he's taking us into the single market by deception and stealth. But what next? He's recently made his intentions very clear in the House of Commons. Firstly, in his statement to Parliament on the 14th of April, reporting on his visit to the Gulf states. And secondly, on the 15th of April in PMQs, where he claimed on each occasion that Britain must move ever closer to the EU in every respect because of the current geopolitical situation. He's using this as an excuse and justification to trash British democracy. But his most blatant attack on our democracy is the announcement that legislation will be introduced in the forthcoming King's Speech for a trade deal with the EU. We are told that this deal will be approved by primary legislation in Parliament, but subsequently all EU trade resets will be passed by secondary legislation in the form of statutory instruments that will be passed without debate or vote. In other words, Starmer will be free to do whatever he wants in passing legislation to take us back into the EU single market. These so-called Henry VIIIth powers owe their origin to Thomas Cromwell and his 1539 Statute of Proclamations, which basically empowered the king to rule by decree. So King Starmer will push through his Rejoiner program effectively by degree. No argument, no debate, no accountability. This is a gross betrayal, not only of the millions who voted for Brexit, but all those who, in their gullibility, believe that Starmer, trust me, I'm a lawyer, would honour his manifesto commitments. Under Starmer, the UK will become a vassal state, force-fed rules like foie gras geese by foreign power over which we have no say, and with regard to their rules, which will be enforced by their unaccountable foreign court. This is an outrageous betrayal of British democracy and of the accountability of politicians to Parliament and the people. And Starmer has already let it be known that the constitutional right of future parliaments to undo his trickery will be frustrated through the inclusion of Farage-proof poison pills to make changes too expensive or too complicated to implement. Oh, what tangled webs we weave when first we seek to deceive.